This is ContraZoom.
Where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Jeff Bulmer.
And I'm Matthew Simpson.
We have been covering the Fantasia Festival since 2021, and we are back with another wrap-up podcast. The festival, which celebrates the best in horror and genre cinema, ran from July 16th to August 2nd in Montreal, and we are here today to talk about some of the films we saw. We have already published 9 reviews at this time of recording, with still a few more to come that you can check out over on ContraZoomPod.com. As I said, today we'll be discussing 6 films that we watched during this year's run, and joining me today, of course, is Jeff Bulmer and Matthew Simpson. Jeff, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Can't complain.
You've been doing a bit of a powerhouse for us in terms of publishing reviews, so you definitely have seen the most out of all of us, including other contributors to the site. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on sort of the films and the selection going on. But first, Matthew, welcome back to the show. I know it's been a little bit since you've been on, but it's always nice having you back.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm always happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. And you were covering Fantasia over for Northern Reel, so you had more of a Canadian leaning to the films that you decided to watch this year. Is that correct?
That is. I've done a terrible job this year because my, real life exploded around the same time again. So I saw a number of films, all of which are Canadian, which I'm very excited about. And I've published exactly one thing so far. So, and I have like 3 or 4 more reviews and three interviews to transcribe still. So like I got a lot of stuff coming, but it's just been a bit slow going because of, real world concerns.
Mm-hmm. As it happens. Well, I'm very excited to see what more coverage you have to provide. But the question I want to go talk about this year is just our general thoughts on the selection of movies that Fantasia once again screened. As much as I love the festival, I was a little frustrated at the lack of press screeners available for remote coverage. Where normally they're pretty good. They sort of keep the biggest titles, their premieres, things like that behind a velvet curtain that you have to be in person to see. But it kind of felt a little more this year that they were even more picky about what films that they would give screeners for. So Jeff, I don't know if you felt the same way or not, or were you very happy with the selection of films that were playing?
I was pretty happy with the selection of films because, on the first day I went through and tried to request basically everything I could and ended up with way too many movies. So I was in a position where, even though, yes, they were keeping a lot of the highest profile stuff not available for screeners, I still had a lot to choose from. So I did feel that a little. Like I looked at the list and I understood how that was a problem, but it didn't affect me too much, thankfully, this year.
Fair. And Matthew, in terms of the Canadian selection, what were your thoughts on the type of movies that were available this year?
I thought the selection was actually pretty good. And Canadian PR people, Canadian film is always like, you want to look at our movie? Yeah, we'll give you our movie. Let's put your movie in front of as many people as possible. So basically everything except for, there was one I asked for that they said no to, but they didn't say no. They said, you know what, we got a distribution deal, so we'll let you know when that happens in like 4 months. So that was like the only one that I didn't really get. But I honestly, again, I didn't actually request all that many. And there was only one where I was like, can I have this? There's one later on that I was like, can I have a screener for this? And they said no. But to be fair, that was like August 3rd. And so they were like, what are you doing, buddy? So
the festival is over. We've wrapped this up.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Fair enough. But yeah, like I said off the top, we are going to be talking about 6 films. We each are bringing to the table 2 films that we saw and going to discuss. And luckily for all but one of them, we're going to be able to have a nice conversation about each of these films. There is one film that Jeff has brought to the table that neither of us had the ability to see, so it'll be a bit of a one-sided conversation for that. But other than that, I'm very excited to talk about the movies that we have here today. So Matthew, as one of the guests today, what movie would you like to talk about first? And if you can tell us a little bit about the plot synopsis.
Yeah, so I saw a Canadian dystopian science fiction film called Homebodies, which stars Wow. Now that I'm talking about it, two young people played by real life twins whose names I forget, but I'm sure Dakota will fill in for me.
Yes, Emma and Ian Ho.
Yes, there you go. They're twins. They play twins. One is red, one is blue. So named because they wear red and blue tracksuits, and they live in a dystopian apartment. And their parent is a computer in a back room, and that's kind of all I really want to say about it, to be totally honest, about the plot. But about, I don't know, like the end of the first act, they've been alone their whole lives, raised by this computer in isolation. And then about a third of the way into the film, a third presence is introduced to the apartment, and all hell breaks loose. Well, not really, but conflict ensues would be the better way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically the whole plot. It's these two kids who've never interacted with another person before suddenly having to do that in an automated house. And it's very low budget and kind of in the best way. It is, I'm sure, did you guys both see it? You did both see it, right?
I have seen it, but I do not believe Jeff has.
I missed this one. I wasn't able to watch it before the podcast, unfortunately.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So the thing that really works about it is that it is very low budget, but it seems to really know that and leverage it. So the apartment that they stay in feels like a set in a way where like that works with the plot. Like it's, it feels like a set in the way where like it feels like a robot built it from like a sketch of an apartment. Like, it feels very, I think the best word is probably liminal. Like it doesn't feel quite real. It feels very cheap. In a way that makes sense for the world. They've really created this one set to look like a set because it, for all intents and purposes, is basically a set for this thing that's happening in the apartment with these two kids.
This movie is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
I really liked
really
it too. And, what you were saying about, the set looks artificial and, from a critiquing eye, you're like, it looks like they cheaped on the set or things like that, or the production design or the lighting or the costuming or the props. But like you said, the kind of more you get into this world, the more this sort of artificiality, uncanny valley, liminalness, whatever adjectives you want to describe that could be pejorative, kind of works in its favor.
I wouldn't even say kind of. I think it works exactly in its favor. I think it really highlights the sort of, like, it's artificial, but on purpose. It's sort of otherworldly, but on purpose. And then you mix in the fact that the kids have been raised in isolation. So, like, they don't have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They have first, second, and third meal. You know, they have a TV, but they have one show that they watch that arrives on a VHS cassette daily. And they've seen all the episodes. Like, it's just really interesting the way they talk and the way they play off each other. And I think the sort of secret sauce here, other than like all the production design we've talked about, is that these kids in real life are twins. So they have this built-in chemistry. So whenever there's like, any amount of cohesion or any amount of friction, it feels supernatural. Like, not supernatural, but like very natural is what I'm trying to say. Because it's real, because they are clearly brother and sister. Like it feels authentic. And the way they both react to the new person, whose name is just Pal, because they don't know its name, and the dad robot says, "This is your new pal," and so they just start calling it Pal, who's a very like androgynous and silent person. And the way they both react to Pal is fascinating. And the conflict introduced via Pal is fascinating. And I really don't want to spoil any more of it because it's so good.
Yeah, I feel like I can add maybe a little bit more contextualization to stuff that you're talking about without spoiling it as well. I think an interesting aspect is that these actors who play the lead, I would categorize them as probably preteens or early teens. They're probably within that range of 12 to 14. So we've got this great performances from them where they simultaneously are able to act extremely childish in the sense of they literally don't know anything else except for each other and having fun. But then they're also kind of just at that precipice of about to start maturing. So we get these really great emotional swings from both of them as they deal with conflict and how they resolve issues that they have, which I think is really fascinating. And then in terms of like the style of the movie, it would be like if you made an entire movie out of the section from Old Boy where he is imprisoned, and that's the movie, but the difference being you don't really know what's going on. Because as you're watching this, a few different ideas of what this movie is kind of pop into your head. Like, is this some sort of psychological experiment, kind of like a Stanford prison experiment type of thing? Is this some weird alien artificial intelligence thing? Is this futuristic? Is this retro? Like, you've got all these different sort of elements going on. And then, like, it's not like Backrooms, but there's a little bit of elements like the liminality that you were discussing that kind of play into this, where you're not really sure how much this space is alive or not, which adds a really interesting wrinkle. All this to say is, like, this is a really low budget Canadian film that absolutely exceeds its expectations. And if you're willing to kind of just like go in and be like, all right, here's a weird little movie, I think you're going to be blown away by it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's definitely the kind of thing that you like scroll past one day on like Shudder or something and be like, what is this? And it's also one of those ones and you'll be like, why would I watch this? But then when you do, you'll be like, you kind of be like, why didn't I watch this before? Like, it's such a great example of like how to do low budget filmmaking.
Yes. Yeah.
And
to use your budget and limitations in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. It's wonderful. I hope it goes far. I hope everyone involved goes far too. But it's probably, of the things that I saw that were new at the festival, it's probably my favorite thing that I saw.
Yeah, without a doubt for me too as well. Casey Walker, who directed this, did an excellent job, and I'm very excited to see. Hopefully, this whether this goes to Crave or Shudder or something like that. Hopefully, people see it, and Casey gets a bigger budget and can do even more cool and inventive things. Because if this is what he's able to do with what appears to be a shoestring budget, very impressive work.
Yeah, 100%. And I honestly, I kind of wish you'd seen it, Jeff, because I would love to get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, the screener is probably no longer available now, but I'll check because this sounds really interesting. And I was this is kind of the theme of this sounds like it fits really well with a couple of the other movies that we're going to talk about here. And I think that I think that Fantasia is really good for these kind of movies, especially. Like, every year there's there's a lot of really cool, basically underground directors doing really interesting stuff with nothing budgets. And as you know, as I'm sure we'll continue to talk about in this episode, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's always really interesting because, like, you don't get to see this at a lot of the bigger festivals. It's the kind of stuff that just can't quite make it there, but really shines at Fantasia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let us move on to our second film. And so, Jeff, let's start with you. What's the first one you want to discuss?
This town has been trapped by the way it sees itself. We need a serious course correction, a jolt.
Bobby, what is it you want?
We just can't keep on hitting the same problems with the same stick.
Hell yes, drugs. Are you a sexual person? My friend wants to know.
Doherty? Stacy, you? You can't send that computer mail. It'll make you look crazy.
So I'm really glad that we started with Homebodies because I had no idea how I was going to start. I misread the message and thought that we were going to start on Dance Freak, and I had no idea how to start on that. But Homebodies gives me a really good in because Dance Freak is also very liminal. I'll start with just reading like my very brief synopsis. Obi's life sucks. His perverted boss just laid him off, even though he's the only one who knows the codes. On his way to his date with his girlfriend, he gets hassled by the salad gang, and when he finally meets up with his girlfriend Doherty, she dumps him to focus on her political career. She's running for mayor so that people stop saying that this town sucks. And at Obi's lowest point, a person appears who looks exactly like him, only that he dances, and that dance kills people. We call it the dance freak because it sometimes dances in freaky ways. So yeah, that's the idea behind Dance Freak by Alan Resnick. Is it Alan Resnick?
And Robbie Ratcliffe.
Yes, Alan Resnick and Robbie Ratcliffe. Robbie Ratcliffe stars as did I already forget his name? Obi. So just like I mean, you were saying this about homebodies, but it's a really good word for me to reuse here. Dance Freak feels very liminal in that, like, the movie has sort of the feel of like a half remembered nightmare. It's like the people in it don't really have names. They only barely have roles, but like the entire world kind of exists to make these very abstract situations that feel very relatable, but also like very distinctly abstract. Like there's no one who can fully relate to a dance freak appears and starts killing and starts, killing your entire town, which has nobody in it. This is not like a real situation, but all of the stuff that happens is very evocative of, like, pretty, I want to say, common experiences. Like, he lives in a town that he doesn't really like. Nobody really likes that town, but they're all kind of stuck there. When you see bits and pieces of the town, it's like all on the outskirts, because the only people that we're like seeing in this town are people on the outskirts. There's a random gang that like doesn't really do anything except kind of hang around and be a gang, and also think about life and philosophize and stuff. It's all very, it's like I mean, perhaps maybe Alan Resnick got his start, or at least got a big boost from the Adult Swim infomercials block that they used to play at 3 a.m. And I mean, you can kind of tell in this movie. And so for people that are very into Adult Swim infomercials, I feel like this is, right up their alley. And I am certainly one of those people.
Yeah, this is one that I watched too. And like, alternative comedy is probably the easiest sort of way to classify it. It's very experimental. It's very absurdist. It's alternative comedy. It's a whole bunch of different things. And it's one of those things where I feel like moment to moment, you don't really know what's going on. But if you're willing to like pull back and think about everything, there is a pretty loose plot going through this in terms of, this one guy kind of his life crumbling and falling apart as he's trying to put the pieces back together and, learn the real reasons why his girlfriend is dumping him and why his life sucks and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if I liked this movie or not. It's a hard movie to say you like or not. I thought it was pretty well done, and it's purposely lo-fi energy really shines through. And if you're on its wavelength, it's easy to like really be on its wavelength. I think for me, what kind of saves it is, for the most part, I think the acting is all really good. I do have a bit of an issue with the woman who plays Doherty. I don't think she's that strong of an actor, but I think all of the supporting characters do a great job that it kind of at least made it entertaining enough for me.
And I do think that, like, I think that Robbie Ratcliffe and Alan Resnick, who I believe also wrote the movie, I think Robbie Ratcliffe might have been the main writer on the movie. I think he writes really well to his actors' strengths. Like you said, you said the actress who plays Doherty isn't, super strong. And I would agree, but I also think that, like, the material that she does well with the material she gets, because I think Robbie Ratcliffe writes really well for her. And she's not in that, well, she's later on she becomes like a main character, but she's used pretty sparingly early on in the movie, and then but like only for scenes that in my opinion really work. Like, she has a political, you see her, I believe you see her filming a like political ad like at a rundown house in the middle of the desert, it looks like. And then there's another scene where she's, giving an interview, and I think she doesn't club someone to death, but she like threatens to. It's very, very weird, like tangential stuff to what's actually going on at the time. But I mean, those scenes kind of worked for me.
Yeah, and it's all shot in black and white. There's a lot of like, I guess the way to describe it would be what appears to be homemade special effects. Like there's often shots of birds flying around, but it is very clearly just sort of superimposed later on, barely wings flapping sort of thing, just sort of shuffling around on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's very lo-fi in its aesthetics. We get some cool stuff in terms of like when the dance freak is sort of being activated, it looks like he's got static from TV just covering his body, kind of like I guess would probably done in a rotoscope animation. I'm not totally sure how they did it, but it's a very interesting in the DIY film sphere, and like it sort of plays like a horror movie, but it's performed like a comedy. So this is a really hard movie to sort of classify, and like, unless you're really into like experimental films, it might not totally be your cup of tea. Like it wasn't totally my cup of tea, but I think I appreciated it enough.
Yeah, this is one. I think I remember you messaging me that you watched this today, and I think this is one that even from my review, I think this is one that like usually I at least try to put something together the same day, but I think this one I had to sit with for a bit to like parse out all of my thoughts. This is one that there's a lot going on here, and like I think it's I lost my train of thought, but basically I was saying I think this is one I had to sit with for a bit.
It feels like if you only took David Lynch nightmare sequences from stuff like Mulholland Drive or Twin Peaks or stuff like that, and then made that into a feature-length film, that's kind of what you're getting.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting, unfortunately I didn't have the chance to see this one at Fantasia, but there's another movie that premiered at Fantasia called Buddy, which is directed by Casper Kelly. Now, I wasn't able to see this one, but that one, it looks like it has quite a bit more of a production budget. But Casper Kelly is the guy who did Too Many Cooks, and Dance Freak is by the guy who did the infomercial that came right after Too Many Cooks. So I think it's interesting that those were both at the same festival, and I'll bet that those are... I feel like those are probably for a similar audience, but like very different vibes. Like if you look at the trailer and the promotional stuff for Buddy, that looks more like a more traditional, but really offbeat horror movie. This is like the Dance Freak is like a very experimental comedy horror to the point where like, except for experimental, it's hard to even know if those other two labels like fully apply in any kind of traditional way.
Yeah, that's very true. This is gonna be one of those movies that like probably it might play a few festivals, but it's gonna be one of the ones that's gonna be very difficult to find probably afterwards it's done its run. This isn't gonna be a box office hit by any means whatsoever. I'm not even too sure what sort of streaming service might be interested in buying the rights to this. So I don't really know what kind of life this film is going to have.
I do kind of wonder if this is one. This one may be one that lives on YouTube because it reminds me a little. Well, it's from like the same. It's from people in the same friend group as Connor O'Malley. He's in the movie, who put Rap World just right onto YouTube, and then all the Adult Swim infomercials live on YouTube. Entirely possible this one just ends up living on YouTube. But if so, then if anything that I or Dakota have said sounds interesting about this, my what I'm trying to get at is that I think this one actually will be quite easy to see in the future for people who are interested in it.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, let's move on to a pretty similar film in terms of genre, and that is Sour Minnows from director Harrison Atkins. This is one that is going to be really tricky to talk about because I'm not really sure what it is. Basically, two guys are walking home one day and they see a group of people licking the asphalt, the road, and it opens a portal for both of them into a world that is our world, but is, oh man, how do I describe this?
Look, I haven't seen this movie, but I'm going to interrupt you to say that the write-up for this movie very specifically says that those people are sensually licking the pavement.
You're right. My apologies. Sensually
that is
licking the
true.
pavement. And yeah, they are weirdly sensually licking the pavement with moans included. Basically, some sort of entity kind of takes over the life of these guys, and they are simultaneously living deja vu while also experiencing new things, which we later realize in a roundabout way have already happened. The only way you can get any sort of reprieve from this entity that controls you is with really loud music. And that's the only time that you can kind of have free conversations. And so it's one main guy in particular who is sort of trying to figure out what is happening to him. And so we sort of see the world going through his lens. He's sort of seeing this one woman played by Susanna Sun from Red Rocket fame. But other than that, this is a very experimental lo-fi film where not a lot makes sense. And so, Jeff, I would love it if you can maybe even provide a bit more context to what I was saying, because this one is hard to describe.
The first thing I want to very briefly correct you. It doesn't have to be loud music. It has to be jazz music.
Jazz music, you're right.
That's why in the car she was playing the music really loud, but as soon as they got to her house, it was just jazz, like ambient in the room.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, this movie, I'm glad we're talking about it after Dance Freak, because this movie reminds me a lot of Dance Freak. And I guess actually from Matthew, your description of Homebodies, I think that, like, you know, liminal space is kind of a theme of just movies this year, or, you know, there's those three movies and a bunch of other stuff that came out this year. Lots of liminal movies, because I felt like this was tackling, I thought, a lot of the same themes as Dance Freak, because Dance Freak to me is kind of, at least in part, about living in like a dead end town and not knowing what to do with your life. And I think that Sour Minnows is kind of a different take on that. You know, there's more than just that theme in both of these movies, but I got it probably 20 minutes into the movie before I'm like, oh, okay, this is just Dance Freak, but, you know, from a different person's mind. And this, to me, I guess Sour Minnows was a little bit more of like a cosmic horror take on it, you know, more that sort of unknowable horror, kind of like in The Lighthouse, where you have no idea what the entity actually is, but it's there, and, you know, the characters don't even know what it is. It's just messing up their life, and they got to either live with it or figure out what to do. And in Dance Freak, it's really more of a Jekyll and Hyde story. Like, there's no cosmic horror there. It's just sort of this one guy's life collapsing around him. But anyway, on Sour Minnows, gosh, it is really strange. I don't know how to fill in more of the details than you did. I guess there is. I don't know if that's spoilery. I don't know if I want to say that. I will defer to you very briefly. Did any of that add anything?
To me, yes. To people like Matthew or other listeners, I don't know.
Honestly, I'm an easy sell on this kind of stuff, so I'm into both the movies you guys have talked about that I haven't seen yet. But like, I will fully admit that I know I'm in the minority on this kind of stuff.
So I'll say this: where Dance Freak could intentionally be confusing at times as misdirection, but you kind of are able to get back on the tracks of where the movie is going, Sour Minnows sort of relishes confusing the audience and not understanding what is happening. The characters, the two main guys, the roommates, they will experience things, or they'll basically, you know, go blank. You know, they'll stop what they're doing, they'll stop talking, the expression will leave their faces, and then when they resume, you know, a minute later, you know, it becomes questions of, what were you saying? sorry, were we about to watch a movie? No, we already watched this movie. How is that possible? And it sort of goes in these like circular, counterproductive conversations that really will throw the viewer on their ass. And then later in the movie, you kind of see the flip side of how they got to that point, because of using the word portal seems weird because it's not like a real portal, but also it kind of is. Basically, I don't really know how much else to describe this. I think I prefer Dance Freak more than Sour Minnows because Sour Minnows was more intentionally obfuscating what is happening.
So, one thing I'll say very briefly about Dance Freak is Dance Freak differs a lot for the sake of bits. Like, there's an entire diversion where they just let Stavros Halkias like do a silly bit about his character's backstory. His character's name is Mega Man, and he has like a 5-minute teary backstory, and it just sort of lets him do that. And Sour Minnows doesn't really have those same diversions. I need to see. I really want to know when this played exactly, like what time of day this played, because Sour Minnows, I watched it very early in the day, obviously, but it feels like a movie that's meant to be watched at midnight because it keeps hitting you with things like, did we just watch this? Well, do you remember what just happened? Like, it keeps hitting you with these moments where if for whatever reason you dozed off for like a minute, maybe not even really dozed off, but just you're tired and maybe you think you did, you closed your eyes for a second, a character will be like, hey, did that just happen? And you're like, excuse me, what? And like, there's all these little bits that like kind of come back later and they sort of wind them together and explain them. But the movie sort of like, the movie messes with you a lot because it's messing with its characters and the characters are audience surrogates.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Much like Dance Freak, I'm not totally sure what the market for Sour Minnows is. You know, it does have a big name in Susanna Sun. Maybe it's also a YouTube type of thing where the director of this is hopefully using this as some sort of springboard for their next project that might be more audacious or bigger budget. But this is definitely firmly in the experimental genre.
And interestingly, it has a big name in Susanna Son, who also produced it. So I think that's very cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder if that was, a part of her contract of her coming on board, that she wanted a bit more of a say, or she helped bring in funding or something like that. Very interesting. But let's move on. And so we're going to loop back around to you, Matthew, for your second film.
So this is a total gear shift. My second film is one called Tight Lettuce, which is a far more straightforward film than anything we've talked about so far. It is a story of a young man. His name is Joel. He's played by an actor called Dakota Dalby. And he lives in a small town. He has a beautiful wife and a loving mother and a heroin and fentanyl addicted father named Bodo. He's played by a French-Canadian actor called Emmanuel Bilodeau. And I found this movie very deeply affecting. The whole story is basically an inversion of, you've probably seen movies where it's like, a parent trying to save their kid from heroin or from other hard drugs. And this is an inversion of that. Joel is very desperately trying to save his father from addiction. And everyone around them is also affected by the fact that he's addicted to heroin, obviously. It plays out very organically. You learn through the course of the film that, like, at one point, Bodo, he used to be a very functioning heroin addict to the point where he had a business. And then, like 5 or 6 years ago, he got introduced to fentanyl, and now he's a complete mess. And he's a big drag on everyone around him. And the reason I found it affecting, personally, is that I spent a long time working in the downtown east side of Vancouver. Now, Jeff, I don't know how well you know Vancouver. I know, Dakota, you have a better idea of this, but like that is like the neighborhood for drugs in the city. And Bilodeau hits all of the hallmark physical tells and emotional tells of someone on those drugs that I was around for like a decade. And so it feels very authentic to the point where I was like, looked him up to make sure he wasn't like a heroin addict. He is so good at playing just like back and forth between like mania and depression, between like, yeah, I want to get clean, to 10 minutes into his first night without drugs, running out the door to find drugs, you know? And then just he's super skinny, which is just a thing you can do, but he has this like posture that's so like telling of a heroin addiction, and the way he like he like can never be still. And the way he treats it all is so matter of fact. There's plenty of scenes where he's taking drugs and it's not like a big dramatic moment. He's just like, oh, time for drugs. And I found the whole thing very, very affecting. I think it's difficult because I think some of the performances are great and some of them are, this is a low budget Canadian film and they're working with what they have. So that sort of undercuts parts of it. But just the interplay between Joel and Bodo, Joel just so desperate to like save his father, and basically everyone else around them being like, this man is a lost cause. Like, good for you, but also he's an anvil around your neck. You know what I mean? To the point where like he has a loving wife and it's stress on their relationship, and he has a loving mother and grandmother and it's a stress on all of their relationships. And if you just ever been around someone who is addicted to drugs or even just booze, like this is probably going to hit for you in a lot of ways. And I'm rambling a little bit now, but to wrap it up, it's also, I think, an interesting and important movie in that this is not like a ghetto. This isn't set in the downtown east side of Vancouver. This is set in a small town, a small rural town, which is where most drug abuse happens, really. In a tight-knit community of normal people. This one guy just happens to be a huge heroin and fentanyl addict. And I feel like it sort of normalizes that as the picture of most drug abuse, you know? So it's a little uneven, but it's an important film. And I hope you all get to see it. I don't know if you guys saw it or not. I hope you did, because I found it really, really touching, really affecting, if a little uneven.
Yeah, this is actually the first Fantasia film I watched this year, and I pretty much agree with everything you said there. I think I noted this in my review. Like if there's any detriment, it's actually how good Emmanuel Bilodeau is in that role. He's so good that it's a little bit distracting from everything else, which is admittedly kind of the point.
Yeah,
but I found that like very few other characters had much of a chance to shine, really. Which, again, I mean, it's a movie about how exhausting this one guy is, and if the performance is so all encompassing that it's a little exhausting, well, that's kind of doing the job. So what are you gonna do? Yeah, I thought this was pretty good. And Emmanuel Bilodeau is fantastic in that. In like specifically, he's by far the standout of this movie. I was really impressed by. I believe this is a true story. Like, this is not
it is, yeah.
Harrison Hode's story, or Harrison Hood. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But his friend. This is a friend of his. This is a story based on a friend of his. And I think that the fact that this is a real story lends this movie a lot of really, really works for this movie, because going into a story like this, I am seeing that, like, even once you notice that inversion, you still expect the story to go a specific way that it doesn't, because it's a real story. It's not, it doesn't have to hit all of the it doesn't have to hit all the tropes, because that's not what it is. So I think that as events evolve, it has some really heartbreaking moments that you don't necessarily see coming. What was the one thing I wanted to say? I think this movie does a really good job of showing exactly like the the extent of that anvil around your neck bit that you were just saying, because like a lot of movies will do that, but I think that's a really hard thing to. I think this movie shows that really believably. Like at certain points in the movie, it's pretty. It feels like, what is his? What is the guy's name? What is his name again? Not Bodo.
The
The
son
other
is
one.
named Joel.
Joel. It really feels like all of Joel's problems would be very easily solved by just cutting off Bodo. And like at many points in like you can see exactly how his life would improve in, but he's obviously not going to do that. And like as you were saying, this is a story that a lot of people can relate to, if you've ever had a relative like this. I think that like um even if you've had a difficult relative, not even nearly this degree, you can like sort of maybe not fully relate to it, but you can sort of see what it's doing to that family. And I think that yeah, I mean just more of that authenticity piece that you were already mentioning that comes through. I think this is a it feels really real.
Yeah, I think that's the word for it. It feels very real, very authentic. Um, and again, like we cannot stress enough how good. Like it's almost unfair. Like there's lots of other good people in this movie. I actually thought Christy Burke, who plays Joel's fiance in the film, whose name has left my brain all of a sudden, um, I thought she was fantastic as well as the sort of like Joel is devoted to her father, and she's like, "I love that you love your father," like very at her wit's end at all points, and she
Mm.
portrays that very realistically as well. But every time Bodo's on screen, which is pretty much literally every scene, he just outshines everyone else. Like he's like a shooting star, which, as you said, is the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sort of what I was thinking of. Like I am, I guess, fortunate to not have been in a situation that is too comparable to this. But like I have in my life at one point had a friend that nobody around me likes. Like literally none of my friends or family like this friend. And I think if you've had, that experience and having to think about, why you hold on to this relationship, that's kind of what this movie is on a very extreme level. So, I mean, I hope I'm not minimizing the movie too much there, but that's just what it made me think of.
No, I think that's valid. I think, yeah, obviously, if you've known someone with a drug addiction, it's a much more of a one-to-one. But I think what you're saying about, even knowing someone who's like difficult and selfish and or like manic or bipolar or anything difficult like that, it would apply.
Hmm.
Nice. Yeah, that's one I wasn't able to check out, but I think sounds like a really important film. And judging by the way you guys are talking about, might be one that we might be discussing for the Canadian Screen Awards next year.
I hope so. I hope so in the case of at least Emmanuel Bilodeau. I think he's really fantastic. Like I say, I think the rest of the performances everyone's doing their best, but it's a little uneven, but he's so good.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, Jeff, well, do you want to talk about your second film of the day?
Yeah. So one thing that the last time I was on the show, we were talking about the Toronto Japanese Film Festival. Obviously, I'm a big fan of a lot of Japanese movies, and Fantasia is a great place for that. They usually have lots of Japanese films. They also always have like a really good series of animation. Like they also have like a really good animation program, which unfortunately this year I wasn't able to get any access to. But one, I think I mentioned a director. I don't know if I actually said the name, but in our Toronto Japanese Film Festival episode, I mentioned a movie by the director Eiji Uchida. He did a movie called Nightflower, and he has another movie out already at Fantasia called The Specials, which I was very excited for. It is in this movie. It's about it's about sort of two rival yakuza gangs. There's two rival yakuza bosses, and one of the bosses wants to kill the other one, but that other boss is always guarded, except when he is he's always guarded or he always has a double, except when his granddaughter is performing at dance competitions because he wants to be a supportive grandfather. So the mafia boss's right-hand man comes up with a plan to kill the rival mafia boss by getting together a group of potential assassins and qualifying for the finals of the Tokyo dance competition, so that they can be front and center and just shoot him from the stage because he'll be right at the front. He'll be right at the front of the audience. So in this movie, The Specials, this is about that group that forms, The Specials, and basically they're, them learning how to be finals qualifying dancers in the Tokyo dance competition, even though they're all pretty old and certainly way past their prime. And it's a pretty silly idea because Yakuza guys become dancers, but it has some really emotional moments, and it does a lot with that concept. I think I don't know how much I talked about Night Flower, but Night Flower is a very dark movie about drug dealing, and this is a much more upbeat movie that still has a lot of heart to it.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting, and you've been such a great promoter of Japanese cinema, modern Japanese cinema, so I'm glad you were able to check out another one. And definitely a shame neither Matthew or I were able to watch this one.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely recommend it highly if you guys ever do have the opportunity. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in our Toronto Japanese Film Festival episode, it is always difficult to know when or if movies like this are going to have any kind of real release in Canada. But this is really good. One thing that I really noticed in this movie, because it is, a movie about assassins, it has fight scenes, and those fight scenes are very good. I've started really paying attention to action scenes a lot more over this last year. And, I think you really notice the bad ones, and there are no bad ones in this movie. And also, nice. It has a really good soundtrack, and I think that it's got really good dancing, and it has it has a believable arc for these, pretty out of shape older guys to realistically make it to the finals of this dance competition. Basically, they're not doing any crazy flips or insane choreography. They're just sort of leaning into, they all came up with music from the 80s, which is 40 years ago now, so they're all really leaning into that time period and being from a different time essentially, and doing impressive choreography that's also not not necessarily strenuous. I think whoever were the choreographers on this, both the action choreographers and just the the dance choreographers, they made some very smart choices with a lot of with this movie, that where choreography is key to making this movie work.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds super fascinating. I'm just looking him up on Letterboxd, the director, Eiji Uchida. I've seen one of his previous films, and that was Midnight Swan, which was a very good film that I think I saw. I think that might have been the Toronto Japanese Film Festival. So yeah, I can definitely vouch for this director's previous work of something that's really good. So yeah, that's definitely one that I want to check out now. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let me know how it is when you see it.
Obviously, yeah. All right, so the last movie we're going to talk about today, what Fantasia often does is they screen older films, either because they're getting restorations or they just want to highlight past films. And so they screened a Canadian horror film from 2008 called Pontypool, directed by Bruce McDonald.
What can you see there, Ken?
Oh, God! They're pulling two people out of a van!
Who are those?
There's a bunch of them. They're people, but they're crazy. They're fighting them. People are getting killed out there. Oh!
Ken, do you see any police? Is anybody trying to restore order down there?
I don't know what the hell has just happened.
Well, we're We're gonna have to see if we can, Ken, are you there, Ken?
This is one of those things where it's long been on my watch list of, great Canadian cinema. And this just gave me the opportunity to finally watch it. And I am so happy I did, because this movie just knocked my socks off. Anyone that is not familiar with Pontypool, basically, it is a zombie outbreak origin story, but it all takes place from the confines of a radio DJ who is hearing things and being told things, but we do not see the zombie outbreak happening in real time. It starts out where a contributor calls in saying that they're seeing a riot at a local medical facility, and they're confused what's going on, and people are just tearing the people inside apart, and then they're running away and attacking other places. And then we start to hear military stuff going on outside. But all of this is being showed to us through the auditory medium. And it stars Stephen McHattie, who is, just one of those absolutely iconic, hey, it's that guy, where you've definitely seen him in a dozen different things. And then it also stars Lisa Houle and Georgina Riley as the radio DJ's producer and the show's assistant. And so it's the three of them basically trapped in what was an old church, but now is a radio station, experiencing a zombie outbreak in real time. Both of you guys watch this, and both of you I preface by saying you're going to really love this film, and I believe both of you responded quite positively. Matthew, let's start with you. What were your thoughts on Pontypool?
Yeah, I'm very, very, very upset that it took me 18 years to see this movie.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you've ever listened to my podcast or read what I've written, this is exactly my kind of thing. Just three people on a stage, lots of talking, surreal stuff happening around them. It's great. I love this kind of thing. And Stephen McHattie, who is, again, you're right, he is maybe the legendary Canadian, hey, it's that guy. And he's got such a perfect voice for the sort of grizzled shock jock radio personality that he's playing. And especially offset with Lisa Houle and Georgina Riley, with their voices in particular during the radio broadcast. I loved every second of this movie, so much. And I am now trying to find some kind of amazing edition of it to purchase on physical media, because I'm upset. That's my whole review. I'm so upset that it took me 18 years to watch this film.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as you, that I can't believe it took me this long. And before I throw it to Jeff, I'll say this. Previously, I've participated in polls of name the 10 best Canadian films of all time. There was a big CBC one a couple years ago that I got to vote on. I've done some podcasts about that. I think this is an easy contender for joining the list of one of the 10 greatest Canadian films ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it would be up there. Oh, I don't know that I'd put it on my top 10, but I would respect if it landed there.
Jeff, I'm very curious to kind of hear your thoughts on this film too, which was a first-time watch for you.
Yeah, I thought it was great. This is one that I've seen the name floating around a bunch. I probably realistically on letterboxd lists of top 100 Canadian movies or something. But this is one that when I saw it was programmed, it definitely rang a bell. And I think this is really cool. Like Matthew said, this is sort of, at least on paper, exactly my kind of thing. And I really liked how Canadian this was. I think, I don't think that's necessarily the defining feature of it, but as I was watching the story unfold, it is something that I think, sort of, it's kind of a story that, I guess theoretically it could happen anywhere, but it feels very much like it's happening in small town Ontario, and it kind of needs to be in small town Ontario. One of the very early things that happens is they receive a message in French, and part of the message is please don't translate this message into English. And like, and I think that, this is, you said zombie, and like the way that the zombies work in this is really interesting, and I think it sort of it sort of like feeds into an anxiety that I don't think you get in a society that isn't specifically bilingual in the way that Canada is. Like there's a whole Tower of Babel thing happening underneath that I think is so fascinating, and like this isn't something that someone writing in Maine would come up with. Like this has to be in Pontypool, Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, if it was in Maine, they wouldn't all switch to speaking French 2/3 of the way through, which
that too, yeah.
Which sounds like a spoiler, but is really not, because like, yeah, it's I loved everything you said about it. I also appreciate and loved.
Like, I'll say the explanation we get doesn't totally work for me, but Bruce McDonald kind of commits so much to this idea that he has in his head that you kind of are able to be like, yeah, I don't quite understand what you're going for, but I'm here. I'm with you. I get it. I understand the character's logic and what they're having to do. It's
a really weird explanation that maybe makes more sense. This is an adaptation of the second book in a trilogy. So I wonder if it makes more sense if you read the trilogy from the beginning.
Yeah. And it's interesting. This movie comes out in 2008, which kind of is like right in the middle of the era from like the mid 2000s to like the late 2010s of like, oh, don't call it a zombie movie. It's not a zombie. There's something else. But we all know it's a friggin' zombie. By any other name, it's still a zombie. So it's sort of interesting that it kind of comes within that wave, but done in such a unique and bold way that like you just have to respect the hell out of McDonald being able to take what should be, one of the most overplayed tropes and genres and really reinvent itself in such a unique and bold way that like, yeah, you're right, Jeff, you are going to see it on lists of like best Canadian films or underrated horror gems or, one location movies or things like that where like, it's one of those types of films that like you can easily put it on a number of lists for reasons that people should check out.
This is going to sound really dumb, but do you know what one of my favorite things about this movie is, as we're talking about it? Of all the films we've talked about today, this is the one everyone listening can go watch. It's on both Crave and CBC Gem for free right now. So go watch this movie.
Yeah, really.
There is one
and like, despite the fact that it's an auditory horror, there were several moments that like really creep me out still. So the fact that you can elicit thrills and scares mostly by sound, very impressive work.
It's also there's also a couple of moments where it's very funny. Like there's a moment where they take a call from a British news station, and that whole section is very funny.
Yes. Yeah. But go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, but even though this is very auditory focused, for people that are listening to this and then go immediately watch Pontypool, obviously don't just listen to Pontypool. Like it is a very visual movie as well. Although I did see there's a radio play version of this movie, which I would be very interested to hear.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've heard
that would be great.
I've heard it's got a slightly different ending too, and I kind of want to find it and listen to it.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, I can absolutely see this. Like I wrote about this movie, and this feels like a natural evolution to Orson Welles performing War of the Worlds on the radio. That's what this feels like.
Yeah, it's certainly an influence, I would say. Yeah,
and. According to Fantasia Festival's official page for it, Robert Davis had that same thought from Paste magazine.
Oh. Wow, look at that. I did not read the Fantasia write-up. That was something that I just wrote about on my own. So I'm glad great minds think alike. Yeah, so as Matthew so eloquently put, go watch this movie. If you live in Canada, you can stream it right now. Definitely go do it. You're in for a real treat if you have not seen Pontypool. But I suspect if you're someone that probably likes Fantasia, you've probably seen Pontypool because it is one of those films for sure.
You know, you would suspect that, but it took Matthew 18 years, and it took me 18 years, and it took you 18 years to watch this movie.
Yeah, I guess you're right. You got a point there. All right. I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap up. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on here today. Matthew, as always, really appreciate your insights and always love an excuse to promote Canadian films. So why don't you tell the good dear listeners where they can catch more of your work?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to find me is there's no easy way, really, because I'm everywhere. But you can find me on social media. I'm primarily on Instagram and Threads at SmassyOAF. You can find my Canadian work in particular, mostly at northernreal.ca, which is my new Canadian site I've been working very hard to not neglect and somewhat losing the battle so far. But you can also find my main portfolio at stretch.ca. I write freelance for several publications, and I appear on a number of podcasts. So you can find most of my work there. And then I'm going to shamelessly plug the DVD and movie collection software that I just released called Film Shelves. So if you have a physical media collection, go to filmshelves.com and track your collection and pay for the subscription so that I can recoup my costs. Please and thank you.
It's a really cool app, and this is one that you've been, talking to me about for what seems like forever. So I'm so happy that you finally launched it, and seems to be growing already. So congratulations to you.
Thanks. It's slow going so far, but it's exciting that people are using it, and there's a pretty good little community building already. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, nice. And Jeff, once again, thank you for coming on as well. Always appreciate your great insights. Where can people find more of your work?
Well, I write a lot for ContraZoom Pod. So that's always a great place to go. I have a lot of Fantasia reviews there. I watched 11 movies and I reviewed most of them. Not all of them, but most of them are up there. And right now I'm gearing up for TIFF, so there will be lots more on there up for TIFF coming up in September. Other than that, I also have a podcast called Classic Movies Live. We talk mostly about movies that are just coming out. And let's see, our last episode was Spider-Man Brand New Day. So nice. Go check that out. Or maybe the last episode was something different by the time you're hearing this. Who knows? But that's on Spotify. And as for social media, I am mostly active on Twitter. I'm not really active, but I am more active there than anywhere else. And you can follow me at UBCOCML.
Nice. Thank you very much. Well, this has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at ContraZoom Pod. Did you watch anything from Fantasia Festival? Leave a comment on Spotify or send us an email. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.